In the last few years, the global stage has transformed into a place of constant crisis. The war in Ukraine has shaken Europe's security in ways unseen since the Cold War. Meanwhile, in the Indo-Pacific, rising tensions in the South China Sea have drawn global attention as China continues to assert dominance over disputed waters. In the Middle East, long-standing rivalries have resurfaced, with nations forming shifting alliances that could alter the entire balance of the region. At first glance, each of these conflicts seems local: Russia versus Ukraine, China versus its neighbors, or disputes among Middle Eastern states. Yet when you zoom out, they reveal a far more alarming picture. These are not isolated events. They are interconnected pieces of a much larger puzzle that could ultimately define whether humanity steps into a new era of peace or tumbles toward a confrontation that some fear could resemble a third world war. So, the question becomes unavoidable. Are we heading toward World War III? The idea may sound dramatic, even sensational, but it's worth examining carefully. Wars today are not the same as wars of the past. They are not only fought on battlefields with tanks and soldiers. Instead, the modern battlefield stretches across cyberspace, global trade, energy pipelines, and financial systems. Sanctions have become weapons. Control over semiconductors, rare minerals, and artificial intelligence has become as critical as the number of warships or missiles a country possesses. Nations no longer need to directly invade one another to inflict damage. A cyber attack on a banking system or an energy grid can cause chaos without firing a single bullet. This new reality means that the line between peace and war has blurred, leaving ordinary people worldwide vulnerable to tensions they may not even see happening in the background. Take the conflict between Russia and Ukraine as an example. What began as a regional war over territory quickly escalated into a global showdown. Western nations, led by the United States and the European Union, funneled billions of dollars in aid, weapons, and intelligence to support Kyiv. In response, Moscow tightened its grip on energy supplies, cutting off gas pipelines that Europe had depended on for decades. Suddenly, households in Berlin, Paris, and Rome were forced to face energy shortages and skyrocketing prices, proof that a war in one corner of the world can reshape lives thousands of miles away. Beyond energy, sanctions against Russia have disrupted global trade, shifting supply chains and forcing countries to rethink economic partnerships. This is why many analysts describe Ukraine not just as a war zone, but as a testing ground where NATO and Moscow indirectly clash, each move shaping the balance of power across Europe and beyond. While the world watches Eastern Europe, China is playing a very different but equally significant game. Beijing's ambitions are no longer confined to its neighborhood. Across Africa, South America, and Southeast Asia, Chinese companies are building highways, ports, and power plants. These infrastructure projects, often tied to loans and long-term agreements, secure Beijing access to vital resources like oil, lithium, and rare earth minerals. This strategy is more than economics. It is about influence. By financing development in dozens of nations, China positions itself as a global alternative to Western powers. And when it comes to Taiwan, the stakes grow even higher. Taiwan is the heart of the global semiconductor industry, producing chips that power everything from smartphones to fighter jets. If tensions there escalate, the ripple effects on global technology and economies would be immediate. China's rise is not just about military power, it's about who will control the very systems that run the modern world. On the other side, the United States still stands as the world's dominant military and financial power, but that dominance is being tested like never before. With commitments to defend allies in Europe, maintain presence in Asia, and stabilize situations in the Middle East, Washington is stretched across multiple fronts. Domestically, the U.S. faces growing political polarization, economic uncertainty, and debates over how much more it can afford to play the role of global policeman. This combination raises a critical question. Can America continue to lead the world as it has for decades, or are we witnessing the gradual decline of U.S. influence? For some, this moment feels like a turning point in history, the exact kind of moment when a miscalculation, an unexpected crisis, or a sudden spark could shift the entire balance of global power. The Middle East, often described as the world's geopolitical crossroads, continues to play a central role in shaping global stability. The region's conflicts are rarely contained within its borders. Instead, they ripple outward, affecting energy prices, religious tensions, and military alliances worldwide. Israel and Iran remain locked in a rivalry that stretches across decades, with both sides investing heavily in defense and influence. Saudi Arabia, long seen as a close ally of the United States, has begun recalibrating its foreign policy, strengthening ties with China and even opening dialogue with Iran. This marks a significant shift, suggesting that even the most traditional alliances are no longer guaranteed. For the global community, the Middle East represents both opportunity and danger. It supplies much of the world's oil and gas, yet it is also one of the most fragile regions when it comes to political stability. A single miscalculation here could have global consequences. Yet it's important to recognize that a potential World War III would not resemble World War II. The tools of conflict have evolved dramatically. Instead of massive ground battles and drawn-out trench warfare, modern confrontations are more likely to feature drones, artificial intelligence-driven targeting systems, and hypersonic missiles that travel at unprecedented speeds. This doesn't necessarily mean that traditional armies are obsolete, but rather that warfare has become faster, more precise, and far less predictable. Even more concerning is the rise of invisible warfare. Cyber attacks on communication networks, banking systems, and power grids can create chaos in an instant, crippling a nation's ability to function without a single tank crossing its borders. In this new era, the battlefield is everywhere, from the skies above the Pacific Ocean to the digital servers of financial institutions. This shift makes the world far more vulnerable, as traditional defenses cannot always protect against silent, technological strikes. One of the clearest signals of a changing world order is the growing influence of the BRICS alliance: Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa. Once seen as merely an economic bloc, BRICS has now expanded to include new members such as Saudi Arabia, Iran, and others eager to challenge the dominance of Western institutions. Collectively, these nations represent a significant portion of the world's population and natural resources. Their goal is straightforward: to create an alternative to the Western-led system that has dominated global trade and finance since the end of World War II. They are working to establish new trade agreements, banking systems, and even energy pricing models that bypass the US dollar. The expansion of BRICS is more than symbolism. It is a direct challenge to the economic dominance of the West. If successful, it could mark the beginning of a multipolar world where power is distributed among multiple centers rather than concentrated in Washington and its allies. This push against the US dollar is particularly significant. For decades, the dollar has functioned as the world's reserve currency, underpinning international trade, investment, and financial stability. From oil transactions to global debt, the dollar has been the standard. But if BRICS nations succeed in establishing a credible alternative, perhaps through a digital currency or commodity-backed system, the global financial landscape could undergo its most dramatic transformation in modern history. A weakened dollar would not only reshape global markets but also diminish America's ability to influence other nations through sanctions or monetary policy. This isn't simply an economic debate, it's a geopolitical one. Whoever controls the world's financial foundation controls leverage over trade, investment, and security. And right now, that foundation appears more contested than at any time in the last 70 years. Meanwhile, NATO is moving in the opposite direction, strengthening its ranks and widening its influence. What began as a Western European defense pact has evolved into a global security network. With Finland and Sweden joining the alliance, NATO's presence has expanded closer to Russia's borders, a move that Moscow views as a direct threat. Beyond Europe, NATO has deepened its partnerships with nations in Asia and the Pacific, signaling that its focus is no longer limited to the Atlantic. For its members, this growth is seen as necessary to counter rising threats. For its adversaries, it is viewed as an encroachment that fuels further tension. Either way, the outcome is the same: a more divided world, where two distinct camps, NATO on one side and BRICS on the other, are solidifying. This division sets the stage for a 21st century standoff that may not yet be labeled as war, but which already feels like one in slow motion. Among the most volatile flashpoints is Taiwan. While the island is home to only 23 million people, its importance to the global economy is enormous. Taiwan produces more than 60% of the world's semiconductors, including the most advanced chips used in smartphones, cars, and even military systems. If tensions between China and Taiwan escalate into open conflict, the shockwaves would be felt everywhere, from Silicon Valley tech firms to European car manufacturers. The United States has pledged support for Taiwan, and several Asian allies have hinted they would stand with Washington. But Beijing sees Taiwan as a non-negotiable part of its territory. This creates a dangerous situation where any misstep, whether a naval exercise gone wrong or a political declaration, could spark a chain reaction. Unlike past conflicts, this wouldn't just be about military power. It would instantly disrupt global supply chains, leaving millions of businesses and consumers scrambling. Energy has already proven to be a weapon in today's geopolitical contest. When Europe cut its reliance on Russian natural gas, it was forced to scramble for alternative suppliers, driving prices upward worldwide. Suddenly, households faced higher utility bills, and industries dependent on cheap energy struggled to remain competitive. At the same time, the race for control over future resources has accelerated. Nations are competing fiercely for lithium, cobalt, and rare earth minerals, key ingredients for electric cars, smartphones, and renewable technologies. Whoever controls these resources will not only dominate the clean energy economy but also shape the future of warfare, since advanced batteries and green technologies are essential to modern militaries. Energy, therefore, is no longer just about keeping the lights on. It is a matter of national security and global influence. Another invisible battlefield is cyberspace. Governments around the world face daily cyber intrusions targeting everything from hospitals to financial institutions. These attacks are rarely covered in mainstream headlines, but their impact can be devastating. A successful strike on a banking system could freeze millions of accounts. A coordinated attack on a power grid could plunge entire cities into darkness. Unlike traditional warfare, cyber conflict leaves no physical destruction, but it can cause massive economic damage and erode trust in public institutions. What makes cyber warfare especially dangerous is its anonymity. Attackers often mask their identities, making retaliation difficult. This gray zone of conflict blurs the line between peace and war, as countries can test one another's defenses without declaring open hostilities. In the 21st century, victory may depend less on tanks and missiles, and more on the ability to protect and control digital infrastructure. Artificial intelligence adds yet another layer of uncertainty. Military strategists warn that AI will revolutionize conflict, giving nations the power to analyze data, target enemies, and deploy autonomous weapons faster than any human could. While some see AI as a tool to reduce casualties by making warfare more precise, others fear it could make conflicts harder to control. An AI system could misinterpret data or escalate situations before leaders even realize what's happening. Beyond the battlefield, AI is shaping the global economy, with countries racing to dominate sectors like robotics, automation, and surveillance. In many ways, the struggle for AI supremacy is as significant as the nuclear arms race of the past century. Whoever masters this technology will set the pace not only in military affairs but in every aspect of global power, from finance to healthcare to communication. Yet it's not only external conflicts that matter. Internal instability within nations is becoming a critical factor in the global equation. Across Europe, protests have erupted over energy prices and inflation. In the United States, political polarization has created deep divides, raising concerns about whether Washington can maintain unity in times of crisis. Emerging economies, too, face domestic pressures, ranging from unemployment to corruption, that make them vulnerable to foreign influence. Social unrest doesn't always make headlines in the same way that missile launches do, but it can destabilize governments, weaken alliances, and provide openings for rival powers to expand their reach. When combined with external pressures, internal instability acts like dry tinder, It only takes a single spark to set larger fires in motion. This is why analysts increasingly warn that the global system is not just divided, it is fragile. While headlines often focus on the most visible conflicts, such as Ukraine or Taiwan, many experts argue that the real transformation of global power is happening in less obvious arenas: finance and technology. Control over international trade routes, digital currencies, and global data systems is becoming as decisive as military strength. Consider how the Internet, once envisioned as a free and open space, is now fragmented by competing regulations and digital firewalls. Similarly, the growing interest in central bank digital currencies, CBDCs, reflects an effort by nations to build monetary systems outside of U.S. oversight. This quiet revolution in technology and finance could determine the shape of world power in the coming decades. Instead of tanks rolling across borders, the deciding battles of the future may unfold in digital ledgers, undersea internet cables, and financial agreements that rewrite the rules of globalization. Institutions once trusted to safeguard peace, like the United Nations, are increasingly paralyzed. The UN Security Council, designed to address global crises, often becomes gridlocked because powerful nations use their veto rights to block decisions. As a result, conflicts escalate while diplomatic solutions stall. This erosion of global governance forces countries to act unilaterally or form smaller coalitions, sometimes escalating tensions further. Without a functioning global referee, disputes that might have once been contained risk spiraling out of control. For ordinary people, this lack of effective international leadership translates into uncertainty, whether through disrupted supply chains, volatile markets, or insecurity about the future. In many ways, the decline of global institutions is itself a silent sign that the world order built after World War II is under unprecedented strain. History reminds us that world wars rarely begin with a single dramatic explosion. Instead, they grow out of a series of smaller crises, alliances, and miscalculations that eventually connect into something far larger. Before World War I, few believed that the assassination of an archduke could ignite a conflict involving dozens of nations. Similarly, before World War II, many underestimated how economic depression, rising nationalism, and weak international institutions would combine to create catastrophe. Today, we see similar warning signs: proxy wars, economic sanctions, and competing alliances hardening against each other. Each event may look manageable in isolation, but together they increase the risk of a spark that sets off a global chain reaction. This perspective is why many historians warn that we may already be living in the fragile prelude to a larger conflict. So, are we already witnessing the early stages of World War III? Some analysts argue that in many respects, it has already begun, just not in the traditional sense. Instead of formal declarations of war, we see economic warfare through sanctions, digital warfare through cyber attacks, and influence warfare through media campaigns and technology control. Proxy conflicts, where great powers back opposing sides in local wars, are becoming the norm. This shadow struggle is reshaping international relations even if it doesn't carry the official label of World War. Others caution against overusing the term, noting that unlike past world wars, global trade still connects rival nations, and diplomacy continues to operate. Either way, the fact that serious experts even raise the question shows how precarious our current moment truly is. The future, however, is not set in stone. While the risks are real, war is not inevitable. Leaders still have the opportunity to step back, rebuild trust, and strengthen cooperation. Multilateral dialogue, responsible management of technology, and renewed investment in global institutions could steer humanity away from the breaking point. The challenge lies in whether nations will prioritize long-term stability over short-term gain. For ordinary citizens around the world, awareness matters too. By understanding these dynamics, people can push for accountability, demand wiser leadership, and prepare for a future shaped by cooperation rather than conflict. We stand at a crossroads. One path leads toward division and confrontation, the other toward renewal and shared prosperity. The question, ultimately, is not only what leaders will choose, but which side of history we, as a global community, decide to stand on.